So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance team meeting for July 14th, 2020. We'll follow our standard agenda, which is outlined in the issue. It was issue number 379. So before we get started on the issues that were tagged, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share? Okay, it doesn't sound like there's any announcements this week. So, okay, on to the first issue, which was tagged, which is defining documenting a process for request for help. That is number 372, and I think that probably was opened by Owen, right? Yes.
Yep. Sorry, I was just getting caught up. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much just looking for feedback. I think there might be enough approvals. I haven't checked in a little bit, but yeah, I was just, just looking for any thoughts or otherwise. I guess would be good to use it to start helping out some of the teams that have been asking us for help, like Axios and Node Fetch and groups like that, projects like that.
Okay. In terms of your PR, it was open 14 days ago, and I forget, we said we needed 4 people, right? Oh, but 4 people, I think, and then 14 days. Let me just find that again. Where's the read? Oh no, 7 days from the 4th approval. So it looks like you can go ahead and land that because it's been 8 days since Glenn landed it.
That's a, I actually have a question on that approval. Is that for someone to land their own PR, or is that for any PR? Because I did merge one yesterday that wasn't 7 days, but had 4 approvals. It was just fixing a link in the README. So hopefully that wasn't overstepping my bounds.
Yeah, I think it's like for any, it can be anybody's PR.
Okay.
So it's not, it's just, that's what we've said is the requirements for any PR to be landed by anybody.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that then.
Yeah, not a big deal for something like that. We could, lots of teams do have like a fast track process, which I don't think we put in place yet, which would make sense for those kinds of things where it's just like a typo, or if it's like a broken link, you kind of want to fix that sooner than later.
Yeah. Okay, that's what it was. I figured that might have been okay, but it's still good to clarify in general. So yeah, I'll take another look at the PR and just make sure I didn't leave any more of my own typos in there. But yeah, that's good. Then I'll merge and also start sharing that information with some of the related issues of teams asking us for some guidance.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, PKGS housekeeping is the next issue. So this is author's license file. This is number 368.
I think I have all the answers there, but I forgot to. I'll remove the label now.
Okay.
I just need to open up the PRs to update to the whatever we agreed.
Right. Agenda label. On that front, the request to charter did land in the TSC repo, so the team is now officially chartered. We probably need, well, we do need to sort of then implement the structure that we'd outlined in our governance, which also landed, I believe. That's in terms of, some of the stuff which I think Dominicus was mentioning, but also in terms of the, indicating who's on the, what was it we'd set out to be, I'm just looking.
Administrative members?
Yeah, I think exactly. So like, I think that's the thing. We'll have to define who the administrative members are and then set up the teams for that. So that's something we should, anyway, that's separate, but something we should get started on. Docs, issue 309, governance models. So this one, I think, Owen, you open that.
Yep. I think it's in the same kind of state as the RFH, and I think it's been open. I'm not sure if it has all the approvals, but it's, yeah, basically just waiting for clearance to land, I suppose.
Okay, so I'm looking, that's 320. Sorry, I must have opened the wrong one. Yeah, no, I did. Hold on, I opened the wrong one.
It's 309.
Yeah. 356.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's the issue. The PR is, yeah, 356. Sorry.
Okay, I see. Right, there's a 2. Just taking a quick look to make sure, confirm. I
think we can merge
Right,
it.
so it does have 4 approvals, and just looking at the last one. So now, yeah, so it's in the same. So basically, okay, so yeah. Okay, so nothing more to discuss on that one.
Oh, I mean, unless anybody has any more thoughts, definitely open to feedback if there is.
No, okay. Dependence tooling number 327.
Quick update on this is there's been some progress made. There's a couple PRs been merged into Wibby. There's still more progress to be made. I think I need to do a fix up on one of the PRs. There's a PR over in dependence as well. Dom, are you okay if I merge that in and open another PR for
So
the
which
MPX? The one over in dependence that's mentioning.
Am I involved then?
MPMI. I think you. Yeah, you reviewed it.
Oh right,
And
yeah, the NPX stuff. Yes,
yeah.
I remember now. Yeah, I think we can merge it as is. Yeah, I did approve it. That was just like a follow up, or if we want to do it, or yeah, no objections there.
Okay. Yeah, I think MPX makes sense as well to have, so I might open another PR. Okay, that's good with me. Yeah, I might untag this issue on the agenda unless everyone wants these updates going forward for every meeting.
I think it's, maybe just bring it, you can bring in updates in the announcements or something if there's something interesting.
That sounds good.
Okay, the next one is PKJS org for W-supported tooling. So that's, I think, as I mentioned, the charter request was approved and landed. So our next step is, right, I guess we've got it right on in the things change. So basically there's a checklist there, but one of the things in the checklist was getting this landed. So I think the next step is to set the administrative, next step is to determine, configure the administrative members. I guess next steps. And then we'll also need to transfer to the node.js org. Or I guess to the project. Anything people want to discuss on that one this week? No, okay, let's move on to the next one, which is next steps on support levels in package.json. That one, I've got, I think the first version of the support tool landed. I do need to look back in that it doesn't, it has a dependency which doesn't support 8, so the CI tests are failing. But I think we agreed that was okay. I'll take a quick look to see if we can avoid that, but otherwise I'll probably just change the CI. And I think then the next step is for us to write up something promoting the support levels along with the, you know, the references to the tool and so forth. Any other comments, thoughts, discussion on that one?
The tool you're making going to be added to PKG.js?
That's where it is.
Okay.
It's under PKGS support. Wes had started it. I just added. We gotten together and agreed on what sort of the minimum MVP was, and that's it's at that. Still, a lot of work could be done. So, like, you know, Glenn, that's probably an area we could get somebody involved in. But it does the basic validation and listing to start, and then, you know, we can build on top of that in terms of, you know, things to help people generate it. You know, more complete validation, more, basically it's just the MVP that we thought we needed before we're going to go out and start promoting that. Okay, any other questions on that one? No, okay. The next one is CI/CD ideas and collective suggestions before we start. This one was opened by.
Sorry, I was on mute. I opened that because Dominic has made a comment, and actually it was rung very true. Like, we can't just offer advice. We have to offer concrete examples. This is the way you can do it. Yeah, because that's often the problem for a lot of people. Like, I don't know how to do this thing. Can you give me a good example? So I've gone away. I've looked at GitLabs and going through GitHub Actions at the moment. What perhaps we could do is take one of the PKG, just like dependents, yeah, and CI/CD it to death, and say, so we have a good example, yeah, with like GitHub Actions. Say, this is how we did one. This is a good example of how to do it. Then we have a concrete example that we actually maintain rather than pointing to references for other people's things. If we write a CI/CD document, I think Dominic is right. It has to actually be opinionated. Lots of times we don't like to be opinionated, but I think in this particular case, we need good examples. Yeah, like we want to, like, you know, just, you know, usual sort of stuff we would do on Travis, you know, like run test. But no, we would then we want to spin it up on Docker. We want to run it. We want to see that some dependents found. Yeah, we wanted to see it hit endpoints, and so people could take that as, you know, a good case example. I must apologize. Most of you know, the stuff I do during the daytime is the traditional, you know, Jenkins based stuff, and now I'm looking into the more highly used ones. So we do stuff already that everyone knows about, like with Travis and stuff, but I'm really looking at GitHub Actions because of its Docker integration, and, you know, the fact that we can run things. You know, it does Windows, it does Mac, it does Linux. It seems to be offering quite a lot. That's just my opinion, but I think we write this document, we're actually going to have an opinion in it. Like, these are some ways of doing it. Hey, you don't need to do it this way, but this way does work.
Right, like it could be, like sometimes the recommendation can be, like, if we can't get agreement on it being very specific, on being like, you should do these things, And then I think you're like, and here's an example of us doing it. Could be
Yes.
it doesn't have to say that's the only way you can do it, but like here's an example of how you can do those things we recommended.
Yeah, so that's what I'm kind of suggesting. So Andrew, if I come along and start raising PRs to CI/CDing stuff with like, currently I'm thinking of GitHub Actions. I mean, there are, for open source ones, it is very clear that it's free, and it does appear to be quite performant. I think that would be a good starting point to go forwards. Dominicus, your opinions? Because when you said that, it resonated with me. Like, hey, we need examples, because we all learn. That's the way we learn. Like, sometimes documentation is hard without an example, and then you see an example, full example, working one, and documentation just makes sense. Like, that's what they meant.
Yeah, I was also kind of referring that to that the very basic concepts, we don't need to go into much detail in the docs, primarily because there's a lot of authoritative sources that have been writing about, what is CI, what is CD, what's an integration test. So we maybe don't need to go into as much detail in there. Just, mention, here's the thing, and go off and read more, read something that, the likes of Martin Fowler and that kind of folk write up, rather than, not that it's a bad thing to rewrite things again and again and explain them in different ways, but sort of not always necessary, and maybe not the focus here. As for the examples, yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's a bit trickier to give CD examples for node packages, right? Because CD of a node package, the life cycle of that ends with an npm publish, and you're done, right? Because you can't really, you're not really, unless you're building something like, I don't know, Ghost, where you have a blogging platform that you deploy into a cloud, and it combines all the modules. So yeah.
But I guess our guidance is for package maintainers. So if that's normally their case, is that a bad thing?
I think that is the main, we sometimes do ourselves out and we say we want this, we want to like talk in a general broader terms about, different ecosystems. We are the biggest ecosystem. And let's shout about something. We are but this is the biggest community, and this is the most common case, is to publish after you've built to NPM. So we should do that.
Which leads back to 2FA, because you can't.
I remember somebody was working on that, and I thought they'd finished it and everything. Yeah, I can't. Who was it now? I don't know. Well, I'm sure, isn't this action thing sort of slightly related to the NPM thing now, and surely they can get it all sorted. I think there's some examples I haven't got to in the readmes on this.
So it seems like a good place to work through that anyway.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
go ahead.
Does it help, or is it worth trying to understand maybe the, I guess, the audience we're trying? I mean, obviously it's package authors, but beginners, advanced? I mean, I guess anybody who has already set it up, would be able to skim through a document like this, but someone who's never set it up potentially might need a, could benefit from concrete examples, as Glenn is referring to. So does it help if we carve out a slice of our audience and kind of focus on that, and then the rest we can offload to, like, all right, now when you're ready to develop your own opinions, here's a bunch of resources, go read those, and then you can do
I think so.
whatever you want.
I think if we can get the basics right, that like 99% of people who are just publishing everyday regular things could use, and they could use these tools that are now available, that would be a big boost, and we can provide the recommendations. I mean, it's a big thing to be able to like compile your code, run the tests, you do the linting, and then, do a small deployment in a container and actually try it out, like integration tests. Yeah. And then the finally is deployment. But the first part is something that actually integrating, code is something most people don't know how to do yet, or is not widely, there's not good advice. So that's kind of the first steps. So
yeah, because I guess to me, I think the if there's kind of one thing that could really help, I think the most is I think is in the PR process, right? If we're kind of assuming GitHub as that common denominator and GitHub Actions, then what makes you feel more confident with your own code and other people's code than seeing that nice green circle at the bottom of your pull request, right? That is, so maybe that's kind of
exactly.
Level. And then we could always add more stuff after, but I think having at least something that gives everybody the ability to at least cross that line, get to that milestone, like, hey, you can, because even when like conversations on like Git, everybody always says they create their own branches. Even a lot of people that work in their own projects still CI themselves. I know I do, just so yeah, that could be maybe the first check mark with some supplemental material for the advanced stuff, and then the advanced stuff could maybe get backfilled in piece by piece
when we teach it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree. So I'm happy that I'm still teaching myself, GitHub Actions. I'm, like 3/4 of the way through the docs. Is making sense. It looks like holds out a lot of promises. It seems to be prominently free for open source, which is like a big thing. The others are not saying that. That's a big deal. And that's why the advice, Travis is free for open source, but it's not really a CI/CD platform. Whereas they're holding out that promise for GitHub Actions. It is. Whether you use their runners or you decide to use your own runners, this is what the end goal is.
And I think your point of pointing to examples that we maintain, because other examples could drift, do their own thing, change. But if we had maybe this is where the PKGS
this is my thinking.
That you guys could just point, be like, hey, this is us, as the term is sometimes referred to, eating our own dog food. So if we break it, then we know right away. And if we want to change it, all we got to do is just make sure we maintain that kind of symbolic link, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. I guess the thing I will comment is GitHub Actions. Using your own runner still has some challenges on platforms because of the .NET dependency. So if you have other platforms other than the mainstream ones, it is potentially still a challenge. But.
Yes, and those are the advanced features we need to start working on for the more challenging things. And I'm going to like hold my hand up and say that I worked in a .NET shop like 8-9 years ago, and I can't even remember. I just can't remember. What to do, so I acknowledge that, and there may be, as you say, more advice than we may need to, once we get the basics there, we can start getting people that are a little bit more skilled in some operating systems and environments involved. They're certainly there.
I mean, I think this even ties into some of our other guidelines, like testing. We could use a PKGS repo or something, but hopefully something in our umbrella to give some examples, so you can not only see us continuously integrating, but hey, here's a handful of unit tests for a node module. Maybe here's even an example of an integration test with like a
and if people could go and review pull request 377, I have Dominicus and I think you, Owen, waiting for re-reviews. I think we've actually mostly finished that. We could probably land that. That went through quite a good process.
Yeah, I think my only review there was just, I don't, unless you've done it since then, was just lifting it out of the drafts folder if we're okay with that. But I'll comment as well. Otherwise, I think it looks good. Yeah, nice work.
I think, don't we need to raise another PR to, like, we land it and then move it out of drafts?
It's up to the team. I'm okay with doing it in the same PR.
Yeah,
All right.
Same with me.
All right.
Anything more on that one?
I'm good.
Okay, so the next issue tagged is repo layout bike shed under node config CI Travis. This is number 5 in that repo. And I'm guessing that was opened by Dominicus.
Yeah, just looking for feedback there. I do have a pull request open implementing that proposal as well. If anyone wants to take a look at that, I'll add it. And yeah, maybe we need to solicit more feedback from the wider community. I don't know. Because this is sort of a thing that we won't be able to change going forward. So
right. What are the main, is it worth highlighting the main things that might be changeable or?
So I think the suggestion, the main suggestion that I'm making there is essentially for folks to be able to import the versions of Node that they want to test in their Travis YAML. There's going to be, let me just share my screen just for the sake of it. Right. Desktop 3. Okay, so you'd have a couple of folders at the root of the repository. So it could look something.
Excuse me.
The implemented version looks. Just go to the top, right? So you would start off with 2 strategies essentially, all versions or LTS versions. The all versions would basically, if you include one of the following files, right? So greater or equal 10, it will mean that it will import all the node versions since version 10, and you will be testing in those. Whereas the strict would import just the versions that are going to be LTS. And it would also include the current version, even if that is not LTS. So a couple of months ago in GTE 12 would have brought you 12, 13, and 14 for a couple of weeks, right? 13 is allowed to drop off the LTS list, whereas in the case of all, whatever you import there, that list will only grow. It will never get removed. Any versions, right? So it's sort of a commitment to, it depends on your support strategy, right? If you support all node versions, then you support all node versions. Whereas if you support LTS, then we only include current for the sake of testing. And also I added a strict folder under LTS, and I hid it inside LTS rather than at the top level, saying something like LTS-strict, primarily because the recommended approach, I would say, should be that you should be testing in LTS plus current, even though your support policy says that you only support LTS, right? So even though you only support LTS from the perspective of the end users, you still want to be running tests in the current version because that gives you feedback, gives the community feedback, whereas strict only includes the versions that are actually LTS or potentially have expired, right? So this does not include 14 yet, for example, because 14 will only become LTS in October. So yeah, that's roughly the structure that I'm proposing there. Yeah.
If you click on, like, say, greater than equal to 6.
This is the strict one.
Right. I guess what I was expecting would be there would just be, I want to test LTS.
Yeah, so, but that's the thing between what you're actually testing in and what you're supporting in, right? And if you're saying that I'm supporting LTS and today the actual LTS versions are 10 and 12.
Yeah.
So you want to test in 10 and 12 and 14 because 14 is upcoming.
Sure. Yeah.
And by the time support for 10 ends, because at the moment to change that, to stop testing in 10, you do need to bump the major version, right? Because if you drop support for a specific node version, then you need to bump your major version, which means that you have to make an explicit opt-in to drop the GTE 10, right? So if you were starting today, you would go with GTE 10, and this would always include 10, 12, 14, 16. But by the time 10 expires, you're still supporting GTE 10 unless you bump a major version, in which case you're also okay to change to GTE 12 or whatever.
Okay, so we're saying you need to change. If you want to drop the LTS, you can't just say, hey, I only support LTS, so that when the LTS goes out of line, I've just
yeah. So I see what you mean. So we will not remove versions from these GTE 10, right? Versions, but we could have something which says explicitly just the LTS. So rather than the strategy, we could have a strategy which automatically drops versions,
right?
Based on the current situation. But that means that for people who use that kind of a strategy, it means that as soon as 10 goes out of support, they drop 10 and they do not release or do not have to release major, they just stop testing in it. And there's a sort of, and I can see people going against that kind of a recommendation. If we want to, it probably makes sense, but it is something to discuss, whether we want to provide such a configuration which automatically drops expired versions.
That's a bit of a hazard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, is people should not drop testing without bumping major, or at least that's been the recommendation that we've been giving.
This is kind of the problem with like having mutable support or mutable sort of like testing versions, like tested versions. Like that's like the contract should live in the package itself, and you should have to bump a major version if you're dropping support or adding support, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm always wondering if we can get to the point where can you set the expectation up front that like, no, this one will only ever support the things that are active. So like, I don't have to tell you that it's going, that when 10 drops, 10 drops
True.
Because I told you ahead of time, right? Like it will only ever be the current LTSs. I mean, I'm not
think it's
sure it works, but
I think it's a fair suggestion. And as a package maintainer, I could probably even subscribe to that. And we could say that, hey, here's our policy. We automatically drop expired LTS node version support without releasing major. And I'm sure there's people who would do and would want to do that, but there's been a lot of contention around that, around expiring support for specific node versions, even though they're no longer supported, without bumping major.
Yeah, because that might mean that you start to opt into net new features in a patch or minor version, right? That now are breaking, but you don't care because you've dropped support, right? Like,
I think
it's fair. If somebody states that as a policy, I think it's fair, and if they communicate it. But we did say that when discussing the support doc, is that even if you declare what your intent is, as soon as you drop the version, we still recommend you bump major, right? Even though the intent is to only support the active LTS versions, you're still, like, for people who are using a specific version, be it unsupported, you still kind of need to. And I think that's in the support doc that we have. I don't mind providing a file for that, but maybe that should be.
We might want to talk about that more. I mean, I don't think people are, like, I just keep wondering if we can get there, but I don't think people are in agreement enough to add it yet. The flip side that I've seen, which we saw in the NAPI one, is like we don't actually break anything, right? Like, so we did a version 3 just because we wanted to drop support for 8. Then somebody said, oh, well, there's this thing that wasn't fixed in, I'm still using 8, but it's not fixed in 2. And we're like, well, but it's fixed in 3, and 3 doesn't break you, so you could use 3, but that's the one that officially dropped support for 8. And like, so if we hadn't been forced to make a new version major to drop support for 8, then they wouldn't have been in that, you know, it would have been like, hey, we know, like they've made the choice. They're using something which is unsupported because we've said we don't support 8 anymore. Like, it doesn't matter if it's like 2 said it supported 8. Well, yeah, it did, but we no longer do, right? Like, we only support, and we're only actively maintaining the ones that match the current LTS. But having to do that bump actually made it worse. And we actually did a release on 2 for something which was unsupported. And it's like, so there are cases where that's not helpful, right?
But I think that even more so, this speaks to the idea that if you import your Travis config to be GTE 8, and then you drop support for 8, even though you don't support it, you can still keep running tests. And when you actually achieve a point where you break 8, you will know because you have 8 tests for 8, and that is when you remove it from Travis to progress. And that is when you tell people, okay, we've told you we don't support it. We don't actually support it now. So, you know, it's a good thing to keep testing in it, even though you don't support it, in the same way that you keep testing in 13, even though 13 is non-LTS.
Right. I can certainly take that point, although it means more work for the maintainer, right? Like when you say, I don't want to support this anymore, it's kind of like to cut down your level of effort, and it's a little bit more effort. So yeah, you know, there's no.
Yeah, I think it's worth providing the config which automatically drops the unsupported versions, and I guess it would go under LTS folder, and it would have something like or current.yaml or something, or active.yaml or whatever with the keyword that we chose, right? Maintain.yaml. And then it would only give you the currently maintained LTS versions. So in LTS, it would give you LTS plus current. In LTS strict, it would only give you the current strict. In all, it does not make sense, I guess, because
no, all is like, hey, it's everything, right? So yeah.
So I think it's fair. You can add a maintained YAML for LTS and LTS strict, and it would drop LTS versions.
Right. Now, I don't want us to add it if we don't think we want people to use it. Like, I'm still just coming from the struggling between the, I understand the bumping the major, but it also has some funny artifacts, and that, like, okay, you've bumped the major, and now people can no longer really use fixes potentially that they could have.
So I'm in this situation. For example, my preferred testing framework is Happy Lab, and officially does not support Node 10, but I think it still runs its tests in 10, and I use it in 10, and it didn't do anything specifically to break 10. So
right.
Yeah, I'd rather do it in a separate issue and a separate PR.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I know there's going to be discussions there, and exactly. I don't want to log the initial work.
No, yeah. So I'm that's what I was saying. I'm totally good. Let's not mix all that in together, but we should have that other discussion because.
I'll open a new issue in CI config Travis for that.
Not to add more, only just for a thought. I wonder if there's a distinction between, in terms of communication, documentation, support, between dropping a version versus like formally adopting a version, you know, where, in the spirit of bike shedding, add more permutations to the matrix of things to discuss. But anyway, yeah, just because I know there is always lots of good conversations around, like, do your dependencies or even your runtime, because this happens a lot with like TypeScript especially, do those influence the versioning of your own package? So, and I think there's a lot of nuance there. So, maybe there's not a one size fits all, but there's, maybe in the spirit of this group, maybe the outcome is like, well, here's the, maybe there's like a good like you said, maybe there's an option where you do always bump it. It's a little bit more work, but that's like the most transparent, or you can, have this other option. But, either way, you just need to be very, very, transparent to your users and, just do it the same way every time kind of thing,
Right. With the support info, we'll have the ability to say, my model is we only support the LTS versions up front, right? So at least there'll be the way to easily communicate that through the metadata to say, well, because anyway, let's take that to a separate issue. It'd be interesting to work through the cases where, like, it's, what's the downside if you haven't bumped your major, and what's the downside if you have, and, just have that discussion and figure out whether we think having that as an option that you can do automatically helps or hurts things. Okay. So sorry, back to that one. Any more comments on that? I think it's anything else you wanted to highlight? Like, I think that I now understand it. I was kind of wondering a bit because I was expecting more of the just include one file and now you don't actually have to do anything. But we've discussed that. So in the context of you need to make a change, what you've got makes sense to me.
Well, then everybody go approve the PR then.
Sure. Okay. Will do. If we have time left over, I'll take some of that time to do that. Which gets us to the end of the agenda. So are there any other things people want to talk about before we close out for today?
I'm not sure if I missed it at the beginning or, but was there any feedback or I guess, or anything to share coming out of Collab Summit and the conference a couple of weeks ago from this group? I wasn't able to attend, so I wasn't sure how it went, but I know we presented, and yeah, I was curious how that turned out. I'm not sure if anybody here was there. Oh, Glenn, you're
Yes.
presented,
Sorry,
right?
I ran upstairs. That's as fast as I can run.
He was just asking if there was anything interesting from the Collaborator Summit in the package maintenance session.
It went well. I wouldn't say there was anything of extra special interest. I think when we got together afterwards and we talked, a lot of things, were there were very common themes. One of them really is we have to get that enterprise engagement going, because when we're holding these talks, we're really talking to people that already agree with us, and we need, as Michael has said, to get out and do a bit of evangelizing. I'm certainly doing it in my organization now. That I think, and Darcy's very accurate, Mark, that it's really hard to do conferences during the day when you're at work, working from home, because they don't leave you alone. That's why actually going away for a conference is a good idea. You can fully concentrate. I think there was broad agreement, and people, did ask to join the triage team for Express, either from the Express one or from the package maintenance one. We mentioned it both, so it went well. With more work to do, folks.
I mean, maybe one of our goals should be, so you want to advocate for, your organization supporting X, Y, and Z, like efforts of the package maintenance working group, the OpenJS Foundation, what can we put together based on, you've obviously got some experience working at your company trying to do that now. So maybe trying to capture and think about what worked, what didn't work. I know we have internally some decks that we have, and that we work with companies in terms of trying to do that as well. Maybe we can try and pull on some of that to have a starting point for people.
I believe so, yes. And I think that's some of the things I want to cover later. Like if I bring people in to talk into my institution, and I'll bring you in at a high level, there'll be just a leaders meeting. and say, you know, I work at this company, we have these projects, you can come and work on it. And with most enterprises, large companies, they like working with other recognized large companies. So say I brought Darcy in, I am from NPM. These are my projects that I require help on. You are free to come along. That sort of thing. And it might be an idea that we actually set goals for people, like you need to get 10 people in the open source or 20 people from your organization. I don't know. What I have found my experience is actually setting targets is helpful, because then you know if you worked or you didn't work. You know, like I have hard targets. We want to get this many people involved. We want to see some engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely numbers always help you drive progress, because you can say, well, we're not at that number yet. Who are the 6 more people we need to find, right? Or anything else to highlight? Or
the other thing is, I think one of the things we do see from the Express Triage group is not everyone that joins. It's like the active member comment you often make. Like you may get members, but how many of them become truly active long term? That figure that, you know, they stay and they contribute long term. That's also something we need to actually look at as we do engagement.
So when you say just to clarify for myself, so from the enterprise, basically, could companies allocate more time to their employees to basically do what we're doing here, and you know, spreading that out throughout other projects and their issues and things like that?
Yeah, if you're, so go ahead.
It's both a case of time and permission. So for my organization, it was a case of they had to go around, they had to like create a process. And for a lot of companies, that involves lawyers. Like, what are they up to? They're terrified, you know, like, what is this open source thing? What do you mean we're already using it?
Who said you could do that?
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. So it's more that there are several aspects to this with large corporations, although they are probably already deeply using the NPM registry. They're not truly aware of the entire ecosystem.
And I think there, like one of the talks, there was the interesting, it was basically making the case that we don't necessarily want companies to just provide money. The amount of money we invest in open source is actually pretty small compared to the amount spent internally. But that really it's beneficial. And also from the business perspective, you get more than just, like if you just provide money, you maybe support the things you're using, but you don't get all the benefits you can as that if you provide people time. And that, you know, that helps to grow your people, grow their skills. They bring back the approaches back to your company. So you get the benefits of that in addition to supporting the projects and reducing your risk by making sure that, you know, if something goes wrong in the critical software you're using, you have some people who know what can help out to figure out what's going on and fix that. So that was kind of like an interesting, wasn't related to our work in terms of the pitch, but very much I think aligned with it.
Yeah, because I think that's, I mean, the money could be helpful, but yeah, it's really what a lot of these maintainers are struggling with is the time to keep up.
Right, and you know,
short of turning that money into like, I guess, short of turning that money to like a pool that people can draw out of and contribute to. It still doesn't really matter if you don't have the eyes on the project in the first place to incentivize, you know, if you don't have anybody looking at a project with, you know, say some money to actually give away, then, you know, the money's just going to sit there as well.
Yeah, it depends. There'll be some, you know, there'll certainly be some groups or some things that, you know, you kind of want to, you know, turn it into a full-time job. In other cases, people don't want it as their full-time job, and so they maybe want more of a community than money to help them do it full-time. But Anything else, Glenn, you think worth highlighting from the summit?
That's probably about it. We have our work cut out,
Okay.
folks.
Yeah. Okay, so I know we want to save a few minutes at the end anyway, so let's stop the stream.